Hey everyone, Dean here, and thanks for dropping by to watch this video. This is the third one in a series of editing landscape images, and these are a little bit different because we don't talk about how to edit, not Photoshop or Lightroom tutorials. We're diving in and sort of analysing the images, and what I'm showing you is what we do and why we do it. So these are all about the why, not the how. Super important. And look, I've scoured YouTube and there's so many tutorials out there on how to edit landscape images, but they all seem to just be tied to a software program, and they're just showing you how to use different things in different software programs. None of them really sort of dive in and get to the nitty-gritty stuff and the stuff that you need to learn, and that is why we edit and what we're actually doing, what we're trying to achieve. So today's image is really interesting. Each one of these I pick a different style of image that needs a different approach. And this is also the interesting thing with this process, is that there's no one set of rules for any image. That's why I'm doing sort of 5 or 6 in this series, so you can watch them and get a complete picture or a complete idea of how to attack different styles of images. So today's image is a really interesting one. It's one that I shot last year while I was in New Zealand. I remember taking the shot thinking, oh wow, this is going to be a real winner. It's a really strong composition, strong foreground. Everything seemed to be working beautifully with it. I got home from that trip. Couple of weeks later, went through, did an edit on it, but it was just one of those ones that really disappointed. I'm sure you guys have had some of those. It's great in the field, and then when you do your edit, it's like, nah, not really working. So I just left it and just sat on it, didn't do anything with it. And then a few days ago, I was scrolling through the archives, found this one, and thought, I have another go at that. But this time I took a totally different approach, and this was a real lesson for me. I sort of learned a lot from this. Sometimes when you edit an image, if you do an edit and it doesn't work, or you don't feel happy with it, then it might not actually be the image. It may be the way you have done the edit. So I looked at this image and I sort of broke it down, I analysed it, and decided to take a completely different approach, and ended up with something that I really liked. So that was good. As I said, it was a great lesson for me. So let's jump in and have a look at this one. I'm not even going to run an intro today. We're going to get straight into it. Let's do it. So this is our image here, and as you can see, it's got a really strong foreground. This tree trunk is very dominant in the frame, and the mistake I made last time with this image was that I put too much emphasis on that log and didn't really sort of think about the other parts of the image, the other elements within it. I was really hell-bent on this, this log sort of jumping off the page and taking the viewer's attention. The other thing with it is that the colours are very sort of soft, and what I ended up with didn't really have a lot of colour, and it wasn't really doing much. So this time I thought I would take a different approach, and what I've decided is that we'll turn it to a black and white, because I think there's not a lot of colour there. The colour's really sort of soft, pretty drab, so it doesn't really do much for the image. It's not like a colourful image. And instead of really making the log dominate, I just want to take these 4 elements. So I've broken it down. I always break a scene down into its major elements. So we've got 4 main elements here. We've got this hill, we've got this rock in the middle, we've got the log, and then we've got this rock in the immediate foreground. Now I'm pretty happy with the background on this. We've sort of got a nice interesting sky, and in all of this sort of negative space up here, we've just got these nice little rocks. They just sit there and they just help fill in that space. they help balance it out. They're sort of doing a nice job there. I don't need to sort of bring those out in the edit. So what I encourage you to do when you're doing these edits is grab a pen and paper and just write down your goals. Write down, everything that you want to do to this image, and you need to start with your direction, with what is the main goal with editing this image. Is it to really make the foreground stand out? Is it to make one element sort of really jump off the page? So once you have an idea of that, then you know how to edit and how much editing to apply to those different areas. So with the previous edit, I really emphasized this log and didn't think too much about, or didn't apply too much editing to these other areas. It was sort of you're drawn into here. But then I think what happened was you were drawn into here, and then that was sort of it, where there are other elements here. So they were getting a bit sort of lost. If I just had the tree trunk going out to an empty ocean, then that would sort of work really well. It'd be more of a minimalistic image, but this one has a few things going on. So what I've decided is my goal with this one is to treat these 4 elements fairly equally. So I'll apply some editing to each of them. Probably the only one is this one in the foreground. I don't want to draw too much attention to it, because then what happens, we would be drawn into that corner and sort of not to the other elements. But I really want to treat these 4 fairly equally, not sort of one of them over dominate. So let me put it this way. I want these to become shapes. Even though this tree trunk is going to really dominate because it's a little bit different to the other 3, I don't want it to be the only thing that really sort of jumps out here. I want these shapes to really sort of stand on their own. So how I'll achieve that is the tree trunk, I'm going to bring some texture out in here with some contrast. This whiter area, I think I'm going to have to tone that down a little bit, because I don't want it to really dominate too much. I'll lighten this rock a little bit and bring the texture out in here, and I've got great detail in here, and this is a little bit dark, so I'll lighten that up a little bit. Then I'll bring some texture out in this foreground rock, but I'll probably darken it off, and by the time I apply a vignette to this, it'll help darken that down a little bit. And then the sky in the background, I'm just going to pretty much leave these as they are. I might add a little bit of contrast. I'll see how it looks in black and white, but I won't be paying too much attention to the water, these rocks, or the sky. Righto, let's get started. So we'll just do a black and white layer here. I think the first thing we need to do is convert this to black and white. And what I'll do here, I'll just have a play with the tones to see what we're getting. So you can see here I can bring the colour out in that hill, that rock a little bit. We had some blue, so we could darken that sky down if we want. But as I said, I don't want the sky to be overpowering, so I'm just going to keep that sort of fairly soft there. And I reckon that's probably about all I need to do. Probably some reds down in that tree trunk. Yeah. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Okay, let's add another layer. Another curves. These are curves adjustment layers. I'm doing this in Photoshop. If you do want to learn how to do this, I'll leave a link up there. I've got tutorials on this. Now what are we going to do here? We want to lighten. So I'll just come in a little bit, because I just want to lighten this middle rock and this hill. So about there. So what I do is I lighten it. We have a mask applied, I mask it out, and then I just brush it back in. So it's a really easy technique. Just get these brushes set up. Righto. So just a little bit on that one. And I'm going to add contrast to this, which will then sort of darken those down a little bit. I just want to come and I want to lighten this foliage up through here. And when I add contrast, it's going to lighten the lights and darken the dark. So just when you're editing, you need to remember your other steps that you're going to apply and the effect that they're going to have in it. Now what I'm also going to do here is just to help a little bit of separation between these two here. See how these two tones are sort of blending in here? And I said I wanted these elements to sort of stand out by themselves. So if I lighten a bit through here on this edge, then it will separate this rock from the tree trunk. And then when I add the contrast, this will darken a bit down through here. Okay, I'll just turn that on and off and have a look at that. Whoops. Okay, so that's off. Yeah, so see how just by lightening that little area on that rock, it's now separating that rock from the tree. Okay. Let's just have a look at that layer. So that was what we started with. Yeah, I think that's fine. That's looking pretty good. Okay, now let's, I just wanted to tone this tree down a bit because, as I said, I don't want that to sort of really jump off the page. And if I have this tree trunk too light, then this tree will really dominate and it'll sort of pull away from these other elements. So let's just do another curves adjustment layer and we will darken. And again, I don't want to darken it right down, I just want to knock the highlights out of it. Okay, let's just zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so I'm just taking the white out of it, just that real sort of stark white. And when I add contrast, it'll bring a little bit of that back in. So this is why I'm doing this to a degree, is that I know that when I add contrast, it's going to make those whites even whiter, which I don't want. Let's have a look at this trunk out here. Yep. And the secret with any editing is just to be really subtle, do things in small amounts, not sort of really big adjustments. Okay, that's looking better. I'll just turn that on and off. Yeah, so see how that tree trunk was just too bright there? It is really sort of distracting. So we've just toned that down, that looks good. Righto. We need to add some contrast, so let's just do another curves adjustment layer. And I might do this one manually, a bit more control. Because I really want to get that tree trunk right. Okay, that looks good. So just mask that out. So now what I want to do with that contrast is I want to apply it to the log, this rock here, and this hill. Okay, I'm not going to apply any contrast back up here, and I'll just, so you can see what happens when we work globally, we're adding contrast everywhere. And we don't want that because we only want the contrast to be applied to the areas of interest. And remember, there's two things that'll drag the viewer's eye, and that is areas that are lighter in an image and areas that have more contrast or more color, but in this case we're black and white. So let's just add our contrast to, let's start with a log. So I know adding contrast here will really bring the texture out in that bark that's on that tree, which is looking fabulous. Okay, and we'll just do a little bit on this guy, but not as much. As I said, I don't want to draw attention into this corner or else we're going to get stuck in that corner. Okay, now this is looking a little bit light through here, so we'll just add some contrast. Beautiful. And I know this hill is going to come up really nice with a bit of contrast in there. Look at that. Fabulous. Beautiful. I reckon that's probably all we need to do. Let's have a look at that layer. Just turn that off and on. Yep. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now what I normally do when I get to this stage is I will look at each area now and just work out whether I need to sort of hone in and work on one particular little spot. And I think everything's looking pretty good. I'm going to add a vignette to this, which will just help sort of bring us into the image. So I think my rock here is looking pretty good. It's not too overpowering. It's being separated from the tree trunk, which is what we wanted. We've now got some really nice texture and detail where the bark is on the tree. I've toned down the highlights here. May actually just bring these highlights down here a little bit. No, I'll leave it, I think, because it helps separate from this rock. And speaking of this rock, we might just actually lighten him a little bit. And on this hillside over here, I just want to lighten this area, this edge out here a little bit. So let's just do another curves adjustment layer. And we can do the one adjustment layer for these two areas. Just zoom in a little bit. So we don't want a lot here. I just want to sort of lighten mid-tones. I don't want to lighten the whites too much. It's just the mid-tones. And we want to just bring it up a little bit. So just some of these darker areas in there. And a little bit around here. Let's just have a look at that. Yeah. Sometimes when you do this, you don't think it's doing anything at all, but then when you turn the layer on and off, you can see that it actually is. So let's have a look at that. We'll just turn that on and off now. Yeah, that's better. So by lightening this bit in here, I've evened this out. With it turned off, I found what's happening is it's a bit too light here and not here, so it's a little bit distracting. You're sort of drawn into this area. So by lightening that end up, it's just balanced it out. And this rock here, I wanted to keep this a little bit lighter, because if it's too dark, then the tree's going to really sort of dominate. Okay, so I think that's looking really good. Let's now add a vignette. Now I've got this set up as an action. If you haven't used vignettes, then I really like them. I think they make a massive difference to images, and I apply them to most of my shots. You do have to be a little bit careful with your subject. So let's have a look at that. So what a vignette does is it just darkens the outside of the image, which what it does then is it really helps sort of draw you in. It sort of pulls you into the middle of the image, and it helps just give it that little bit of direction. Okay, let's have a look at that. So that's off and that's on. That's about all we need. Okay, that is looking good. I'm happy with that. That's all we need to do. Let's have a look at our history. So we started with that, and then we ended up with that. Okay, so we're pretty much done here. I want to just quickly run through these layers with you and just show you what each adjustment has done. So I'll just turn this one off here. I've got everything, all the layers turned off. So our first one here was to lighten. So we lightened the rock, the hill, and we created a bit of separation down here from this rock and the log. So just turn that one on and off again. So that's off there, and that's on. Okay, and then the second layer, then I sort of felt this tree trunk was a little bit white, and by the time we added contrast, it was going to get worse, and it was it was going to be too dominating, so we just toned that down. So that's that one there. Third one was contrast. So we applied contrast to select areas to help bring that out. That's off and that's on there. And you can see the contrast is really, really important. It's probably the most critical part of any edit, I reckon, is how much contrast you apply and where you apply it. Okay, then we reanalyzed and we decided that we wanted to just lighten this rock up a little bit more and lighten the end of that hill, because this section in here was a little bit unbalanced tonal wise. So that's that one there. So that's off and that's on. And then our final was our vignette. So I hope you enjoyed that one. I think the key thing with this one was how important it was to get that first bit right, as in deciding what we want to do with the image and how we want the elements to interact with each other. That was a real sort of eye-opener for me after editing this image with a different mindset and it not working, and then this time approaching it a little bit differently and it working out, which is awesome. Now, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, and if you're not following this channel, feel free to hit the subscribe button. That'll be awesome. You guys have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya. Ciao.